Paul is claiming that deads don't work the hamstrings because during a deadlift, the quadriceps are working to extend the knee and the hamstrings are working to pull the lower leg back and flex the knee. His argument, and I'm not kidding, is that deadlifts don't grow the hamstrings because the hamstrings have to shut off during a deadlift. Since their actions are antagonistic, he reasons that antagonist inhibition must be at play here in order for the knee to extend at all. He says you cannot have knee flexion and knee extension occurring at the same time, so one muscle has to say, okay, I'm bowing out so you can do this. Now imagine for a moment you're watching a tug-of-war contest, and as it goes on, you start to see the flag at the center of the rope drift to one side. Now if I were to say, oh, it must mean that one side just completely gave up, you would probably be justified in calling me cross-eyed corn dog in the bathroom, fuck your cousin, drool on your light up Skechers retarded. Even though it's compelling to a lot of you when Paul gives his jargon word salad and then says because biomechanics, he is in fact completely wrong here. You see, antagonist inhibition isn't why the knee successfully extends during a squat or deadlift. It's actually described by Lombard's paradox. This scenario describes the unintuitive movement where something like a squat goes off seamlessly even though two antagonistic biarticulate muscles are working against each other. In this scenario, it is the hamstrings crossing the knee and hip, along with the rectus femoris crossing the knee and hip. They both seemingly have antagonistic functions, yet they both crank together in order to pull off a successful squat. Now, this isn't actually a paradox at all, it's just a basic physics diagram. If you have two muscles that are on either side of a joint and they're both cranking, but muscle A is cranking a lot harder than muscle B, muscle A is going to win. The quadriceps are a big fucking muscle group, but more importantly than that, the tendon attaches further down the lower leg than the tendon of the hamstrings. That gives it a bigger moment, which means that every effort of quadricep movement is going to result in more force on the knee, so it wins in the battle for torque. Now, single joint movements, it doesn't matter because there's no need for coordination or stability. If we're talking about a leg extension, then yeah, the hamstrings are just not a factor. But because both joints are bound in a circular fashion by these two biarticulate muscles, any movement at one joint transfers force directly across the antagonistic biarticulate muscle. Imagine you're at the bottom of the squat and your hamstrings, it's just a fixed piece of string. It doesn't move, it stays tight. Physically moving the knee into extension causes slack to get taken out of that short hamstring and will automatically aid in hip extension. So in that way, the hamstrings serve as a conduit so the quadriceps can directly transfer force and actually aid in hip extension. And when the hips extend, the exact same thing is happening at the knee via the rectus femoris. This creates not just an immense amount of stability at these joints, but it makes coordination much, much easier. Imagine what failing during a squat would look like if you only had either knee or hip extensor muscles. In these movements, the hamstring's hip extension moment outweighs that of the rectus femoris and vice versa at the knee. Neither are inhibited, they're both active as fuck. If you don't believe me, go torch your hamstrings and then try to squat. Or try to deadlift for that matter. Let me know how it goes off. I mean, when this cerebral palsy spurg out happens on a max deadlift, when guys start shaking and convulsing, trying to get a heavy pull all the way up to lockout, it is because the hamstrings are under immense stress because they're active as fuck, and the nervous system is struggling to coordinate those antagonist biarticulate muscles under such immense stress. If they were inhibited, that wouldn't be happening, and it would mean you wouldn't really need strong hamstrings in order to build a big deadlift, and you wouldn't have to temper them to immense weight to keep that from happening. Now, because these muscles are working to lengthen at one end and contract at the other, they don't go through as much total length change, and that probably takes a little bit of mustard off of the hypertrophic development. Maybe they're not the highest bang for your buck, super duper S tier movement you could do if you actually want to focus on that particular muscle. So even if we could say that deadlifts don't grow your hamstrings, or let's be reasonable and say don't grow them as well as something else might, we can say Paul's reason for that being the case is absolutely corn dog in the bathtub retarded. But we know that it does, and we don't even have to get into the obnoxious biomechanic jargon salad circle jerk in order to figure it out. You just have to stress test your ideas, engage in a couple of thought experiments. What would happen if we put somebody on an island, just give them a bunch of protein, bunch of complex carbs and a barbell and say, you're just gonna deadlift for the next 5 years? Would we expect to see bigger hamstrings at the end of it? Are you telling me the starting strength knuckleheads don't experience any hamstring growth from literally just squatting and just deadlifting? Can you go from a 225 to a 600 pound deadlift without seeing hamstring growth? Again, maybe not the most focused approach right now, but long term, it absolutely does fucking grow you. And it's just super tiresome to see this constant recycling of absolute all cap statements that don't pass the truck stop bathroom smell test. Yeah, it's great for branding and getting a bunch of dipshit teenagers that couldn't wipe their ass 5 minutes ago to think that you're fucking brilliant, but it's poisoning the well in this entire industry, which for the last 100 years has dealt with nothing but the well continuously being poisoned. And given that we've actually already realized the slippery slope of this biomechanical circle jerk, what with the constant misappropriation of regular ass gym equipment by a bunch of skinny twerps bringing cuffs and measuring tapes and mouth guards to the fucking gym, squeezing handles that aren't attached to anything because they read some shit about Sherrington's law of irradiation and now they think they've hacked bodybuilding. If we're gonna slide from one extreme to the other, I think we know which one is going to consistently give better results. And Paul's a fucking psychopath, but I generally like him. I read a lot of his shit, but that's why I recommend that you just ignore everything he's said over the last 5 or 8 years. Go buy his older books and you'll see this exact same shit, and that's when Paul was at his biggest, his strongest. I actually miss old Paul because not only was he not so insufferable, that was back when him being the curmudgeonly asshole was kind of endearing and not completely dysfunctional, but his books were filled with the type of simple grandfatherly wisdom that you would want to dominate any discipline. Hard work and progressive overload grows you. Bodybuilders know how to grow. I don't care what the scientists say. Worry about the basics. Don't complicate shit. This is generally what he used to preach back in the day. But as he described himself, he had to go through a reinvention to stay relevant, and good for him, he managed to do that. Now, this is kind of a weird thing to be yelling at because the type of people that are hyper fixated on hamstring growth, like bodybuilders, generally aren't prescribing a ton of basic compound deadlifts anyways, so you haven't convinced any seasoned bodybuilders that they need to change what they're doing because they weren't doing that shit anyways. All you've got is a bunch of fucking kids spazzing out because now they're worried that the simple barbell progression they're on actually is going to be a waste of time and I gotta go hook up rubber bands to a fucking row machine and figure out how to do hamstrings on. We're already further in the weeds than I like to get. I'm already getting anxious from this super myopic discussion because it doesn't serve anybody. At the end of the day, this is just low stakes. I just love pointing out when Paul's wrong because he's very often an asshole for no reason. Anyways, that's all I got to say about that. I anticipate my call Parker block in 3, 2,